Welcome, everyone. It is great to be back with you here for this is our fourth year of Parked at Home. Kind of tough to believe that we've been doing this for 4 years, but it's a series that we love to do. It's a great opportunity for us to connect with people across the country. We are very happy that you all can join us. If you're a return visitor here to Parked at Home, welcome back. If you are a new Parked at Home person, welcome. We hope that you'll join us for the rest of the series for the next 5 weeks as we journey all across the country to some really amazing places. So thank you all. If it wasn't for you all showing up, we wouldn't be able to do this series. So thank you for being here. Just real quick, some logistical things before we get started. We just ask that everybody please remain on mute for the duration of the presentation. If you have, when you're on Zoom there, you'll have that bar either going across the bottom or the top of your screen. Usually on the left-hand side, you'll see those microphone and camera icons. Make sure that you are on mute. And you are welcome to either have your video on or off. If you want to share your smiling face with us from wherever you're visiting us, you are more than welcome to do that. But if you do not feel comfortable with that, you are also more than welcome to turn your camera off too as well. These presentations are recorded and they do get posted to the Parks YouTube channel. So if you do miss one or you want to go back, if you're new to this series and you want to go back and watch some of our former presentations, you can go and check those out on the Parks YouTube channel. Also, this program is being American Sign Language interpreted. If you require those services on that little bar again across the bottom of your screen, you'll see that icon that looks like a globe that says interpretation. You'll want to click that and that will pop the interpreter up onto your screen. We are very lucky to have Sherilyn King with us this evening as our ASL interpreter. We're grateful to her for joining us again for the entire series. So if you require those services, that option is there for you as well. And we also want to encourage folks to use the chat option to let us know where you're joining from, of course. And also, if you have any questions or comments, if you want to add to our discussion once Darcy is done with her presentation about Rocky Mountain National Park, we want to encourage you to participate by using that chat option on the bottom of your screen. Also want to indicate I am joined here by both two of my colleagues, Allison Horrocks and Jill Forrester. Jill is your go-to tonight for any tech issues. So if you're having any issues with anything technically related, feel free to message Jill directly for that. And now, most importantly, get comfortable, pop some popcorn, find your favorite chair or your couch, sit back, and let's enjoy this virtual visit to Rocky Mountain National Park. Before we jump in, though, to the story of Rocky Mountain National Park, and I promise I will not sing John Denver's Rocky Mountain High on the present during this presentation tonight. But before we jump into that story of Rocky Mountain, I want to talk a little bit about our park here, Blackstone River Valley National Historical Park. It's a park that's located in both Rhode Island and Massachusetts and really focuses in on that story of the American Industrial Revolution and the Blackstone River Valley as being this birthplace and kind of incubator for the American Industrial Revolution. And a lot of times, people will associate perhaps one of our more famous sites in the park that you see pictured on your screen here, Old Slater Mill, with the park. So in this picture, you see two historic mill buildings, one on the right, a yellow, peachy-ish colored 2.5-story building that is Old Slater Mill, the first successful water-powered cotton spinning mill in North America, widely accepted as the birthplace of the American Industrial Revolution. And then that 3.5-story stone mill structure known as the Wilkinson Mill, built about 17 years later. And then running in front of both of those buildings from right to left across your screen is the Blackstone River. In many ways, the lifeblood of this park and the story here in the Blackstone River Valley, the power source for both of those mills on the screen throughout much of their history. But as pretty as this picture is, and I'll say that because I'm the photographer of this picture, I think that talking about memories and capturing memories through photography is an important thing. You know, when we show up at a National Park Service site, whether it's Old Slater Mill or Rocky Mountain National Park, one of the first things that we may see is folks, visitors like you and me, whipping their cell phones out of their pocket or taking out a very fancy camera and snapping a picture. And although you're at a place like Rocky Mountain and there may be dozens of other people taking photographs of the same thing, each one of those people will bring, if you were to look at all of those pictures collectively together, each one would be slightly different and slightly unique. What was the person trying to capture? You know, we say a lot of times a picture is worth a thousand words. Well, I think in many ways, yes, that's true. A picture is worth a thousand words. But I think it also tells us something very important about the person who took the picture. What angle do they choose? What things do they choose to include in their photograph? And what things do they choose to leave out? Do they include their family or the people that they're traveling with? Or do they choose to cut out those other tourists from their picture to not include them in their photograph? This photo is a great example. On our park website, we have banner images across of all of the National Park Service websites. And they have to be these kind of wide-angled shots in order to fit at the very top of our website. Well, the morning when I took this picture, it was the first snowfall of the year, that beautiful white layer of snow coating the buildings and the grounds there at Slater Mill. And I went out to take a photograph for a very specific reason. A lot of times, who is taking the photo and their perspective on the photo can tell us a lot about the person and the place. Over the last 3 years, we've been shown a lot of different photographs from different perspective. Different images have been described to us as well, and all of them have conveyed a story of different places, different perspectives, but in many ways our collective story together. We visited 18 Park Service sites in 17 different states over the last 3 years. We've been to 7 national historical parks, 4 national parks, 2 national preserves, 2 national historic sites, 1 national memorial, 1 national seashore, 1 national recreation area, and 1 national monument. But who's counting anyways? Well, I guess I did. But all of these places have been historically and ecologically diverse, places like the Everglades and Yellowstone National Park, the Statue of Liberty and Pullman National Historical Site, Wright Brothers National Memorial, and Amistad National Recreation Area. This year, we're going to see perspectives, photographs, images from 5 new sites in 3 new states, and even 1 new type of designation, an international historic site. But tonight, we're going to visit one of those sites located in Colorado, about 2,000 miles away from the Blackstone River Valley, one of the big 63 national parks, Rocky Mountain National Park. And when I started to do some research on Rocky Mountain National Park, you know, I was kind of clicking around on their website and I saw that there was an old Fall River Road located in Rocky Mountain National Park. And Darcy will talk a little bit more about this, but the image on your screen here is, and Darcy can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'm correct because I pulled it off the website, is of Old Fall River Road in Rocky Mountain National Park. You see this kind of dirt road with the red vehicle driving up it and this kind of chasm between 2 massive mountains. But when I heard that this road was called Old Fall River Road, I immediately had a connection with a very different photograph. About 2,000 miles away from Rocky Mountain National Park, in a very small community located in southeastern Massachusetts, there's another Old Fall River Road, a place called Dartmouth, Massachusetts. And the photograph that I thought of immediately was this one, an old kind of rundown farmhouse located in Dartmouth on Old Fall River Road. The last photograph that was taken of this home that my maternal grandmother lived in for most of the 99 years of her life. And I kind of immediately thought of this image when I heard Old Fall River Road and the importance that this image, the last image that we took of it before the family had sold the house after my grandmother had passed away. 2,000 miles of difference, and I know this Old Fall River Road photo looks very different than this one. But immediately I had a connection to the place, and I knew right away that I've never been to Rocky Mountain National Park, but when I visited it, I want to go and I want to get a picture of that Old Fall River Road as well. Over the next 5 weeks, we're going to see a lot of images from different park sites in different locations. And I want you to look at those images as we make our way through the next 5 weeks and think about not only the important stories that these places of natural beauty or historical importance tell us, but what those photographs also tell us about the people who live, work, and visit these places. But tonight, that's enough of talking about photographs. Let's look at some really cool photographs of Rocky Mountain National Park. I want to welcome this evening our guest who is joining us from Rocky Mountain National Park, Darcy Lilla. Darcy is a winter naturalist at Rocky Mount for the Rocky Mountain Conservancy and is also a former park ranger at that site. So, Darcy, welcome this evening. We're very happy to have you, and we're very excited to hear all about Rocky Mountain National Park.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was great. And I loved your intro talking about photographs because I'm going to show you lots of different photographs today of Rocky Mountain National Park. So hello, everyone. So like Mark said, my name is Darcy. I'm a winter naturalist with our nonprofit partner of Rocky Mountain National Park, the Rocky Mountain Conservancy. So I'm really excited to be here with all of you today to talk to you a little bit more about Rocky Mountain National Park and what makes this place special. So to fully understand the whole story of Rocky, we must start with what this place was like before it became a national park. Indigenous people have lived and traveled in this region for thousands of years. The first documented were the Clovis Paleo-Indian hunters, about 10,000 BC. Later in the 1200s, native tribes such as the Eastern Shoshone, Arapaho, Apache, Comanche, Cheyenne, and Ute tribes entered and traveled through this area. They valued this land for rituals, spiritual connection, and the plants and animals that supported their lives. However, in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, thousands of English settlers and gold miners flooded this area, pushing the native tribes out of this region. This changed the land forever. Settlers used the land for fur trapping, ranching, hunting, and gold mining, impacting and changing this land from what it has been. With ranchers, miners, hunters, and homesteaders came tourists. Many ranchers turned their houses and barns into dude ranches and lodging. One of those early lodgers was Abner Spragg and his wife, Mary Alberta. In 1874, Abner Spragg homesteaded in Moraine Park area and built Spragg's ranch, later sold and known as Steed's Ranch. So Abner and his wife were one of the first to establish tourism and dude ranching in this area that would later become Rocky Mountain National Park. So by the 1900s, the growing national conservation and preservation movement led by Theodore Roosevelt, Gifford Pinchot, and John Muir advocated an appreciation of nature. Worried about the destruction of these beautiful landscapes, this sparked local conservation movements by the Estes Park Protective and Improvement Association, and some began to advocate for a national park. And one of those local advocates was Enos Mills. Enos Mills was a writer, speaker, and conservationist, best known as the father of Rocky Mountain National Park. Enos grew up in Kansas and moved to Colorado due to health reasons. So in the 1880s, Colorado was the place to go where many sick people went to recover from illnesses. There, he became a naturalist, a nature guide, and a lodge owner. He started noticing the impacts the humans had on the environment. And he looked to John Muir's example of protecting the sequoia trees in California by making a national park, and decided the best way to keep Rocky Mountain safe was to make it a national park too. So in 1907, Enos Mills, James Grafton Rogers, and others began lobbying for the establishment of Rocky Mountain National Park. He hoped that in years to come, when I'm asleep beneath the pines and thousands of families will find rest and hope in this park. So he spent years lecturing across the country, writing thousands of letters and articles, and lobbying to Congress to create a new national park. Most civic leaders supported the idea, as did Denver Chamber of Commerce and the Colorado Mountain Club. In general, though, mining, logging, and agricultural interests were very opposed. But after many years, his hard work was successful. So on January 26, 1915, President Woodrow Wilson signed the Rocky Mountain National Park Act, making Rocky the 10th national park and one of the few that were designated before the Organic Act of 1916. So as visitation increased during the first couple decades since the park's establishment, the simple park facilities and private lodges became inadequate. So in the 1930s, the nation entered into what we called the American Nature Movement. So this movement promoted the natural places that tourist attractions with everyday amenities. So in 1933, as part of the New Deal, 112 men came to Rocky Mountain National Park to form NP1C, the first CC camp west of the Mississippi River. They constructed roads, trails, and buildings, as well as phone lines. They also fought fires, searched for lost hikers, designed museum exhibits, and so much more. From then on, Rocky Mountain grew in popularity for its accommodations and activities, such as a ski resort, cabins, post offices, ranches, and hotels. So for example, Steed's Ranch, formerly owned by Abner Spragg, located in Moraine Park, including a swimming pool, rodeo grounds, stables, guest houses, a hotel, and a golf course. So this was one of the many accommodations or attractions that drew visitors here to Rocky Mountain during that time. However, this is what Moraine Park looks like today. So as you can notice, there is no more golf course. And that's because the area was restored back to its natural state. So this restoration of Rocky was sparked by the wilderness preservation movement in the 1960s and the environmental movement in the 80s. The National Park Service purchased many of the private lands and removed buildings, roads, post offices, driveways, and fences. The National Park's main focus from that point on was to return Rocky Mountain to its natural state so that nature could be nature. However, they also wanted to make sure that they could accommodate the visitors still coming to Rocky Mountain National Park and find that balance between protecting and preserving the park while also enhancing visitor experiences in the park. So the National Park Service implemented Mission 66, a nationwide development and improvement program, and brought new comfort stations, overlooks, campgrounds, and visitor centers to Rocky Mountain National Park that blended better into nature. So during the Mission 66 era, they also improved trails and roads, and many of these roads are still in use today, such as Old Fall River Road. So Old Fall River Road opened in 1920 and was the first automobile route that led to the high country here in Rocky Mountain National Park. So if you're brave enough, you can still drive this road to this day. So, however, it is still all gravel, and it is a one-way road leading up to the Alpine Visitor Center. And it's only open during the summer season, typically from early July until early fall when the first snow comes. Another road you can drive today to get to the top of the mountains is Trail Ridge Road. Trail Ridge Road was built in 1929 to 1932 by the Park Service to make it more accessible to get into the high country compared to Old Fall River Road that has lots of switchbacks and is very, very narrow in some spots. So this allowed people to access more of the unique alpine tundra landscape at the tops of the mountains. So Trail Ridge Road takes you from the east side of the park to the west side of the park with several overlooks and pull-offs along the way that you can stop at and admire the view. And a fun fact, Trail Ridge Road is the highest continuous paved highway in North America at its peak at 12,183 feet. So this road, like the Old Fall River Road, is still used today and is one of the most popular drives in the park. But it's only drivable from around Memorial Day weekend to early fall as well. And let me show you why. So we can get several feet of snow in the mountains that impact the accessibility to the alpine tundra during the winter. So winter in Rocky lasts up to 7 to 8 months at times, bringing up to about 15 to 30 feet of snow in the alpine. So this video shows a snowplow that is working to clear the alpine portion of Trail Ridge Road. And here's another video of snow removal. And for reference, this snowplow is 15 feet tall. It takes a dedicated team about 6 weeks to remove all of this snow from the road before the annual opening of Trail Ridge Road around the end of May. As you drive along Trail Ridge Road or Old Fall River Road, you can stop at the Alpine Visitor Center and do some hiking in the alpine tundra and take in breathtaking views. At 11,796 feet, the Alpine Visitor Center is the highest facility of its kind in the National Park Service. There you can pick up a park map, talk to a ranger, attend a ranger-led program, and walk through exhibits with information about the alpine tundra ecosystem. Although Rocky Mountain National Park is known for its mountains, as it's part of its name, there are several other areas to explore here in Rocky. So in total, Rocky Mountain National Park is 415 square miles, and that's about the size of 200,000 football fields, as well as the park is also about 95% wilderness area. There are 4 prominent ecosystems found here at Rocky. There's the alpine tundra, there's the subalpine where most of our forests are, there's the montane, as well as riparian areas, so rivers, lakes, and streams that can be found throughout the park. So one of the main reasons Rocky was created a national park was to protect the alpine tundra ecosystem. Rocky has one of the largest examples of protected alpine tundra in the lower 48 states, and it makes up about 1/3 of the park. There are also subalpine ecosystems that are consisted of spruce and fir forests, and where visitors can hike to some of our beautiful mountain lakes, such as Mills Lake or Dream Lake. The montane or glacially made meadows are great places to take in views, as well as watch wildlife. So during the fall, the park's meadows fill with so many elk, hundreds of elk that come together during the elk rut, and you can hear them bugling throughout the evening. It's quite the sight to see. So this is Moraine Park in early fall. Then there are rivers, lakes, and waterfalls throughout Rocky Mountain National Park. And Rocky is the start of 4 different headwaters or watersheds that flow both east and west of the mountains and the Continental Divide. So 2 of our larger rivers are the Big Thompson River that flows east and the Colorado River that flows west. There are about 450 miles of rivers here in Rocky and about 145 lakes here in Rocky Mountain. So over the last few years, we have seen over 4 million visitors come to Rocky Mountain National Park. And many of these visitors are drawn or connected to this place for different ways and different reasons. Some might come to take in the beautiful, breathtaking scenic views. Some come to go backpacking in our wilderness or backcountry areas, or even just hike to some of those beautiful lakes like I showed you earlier. Some might come here to camp with their families, or some might go horseback riding to explore some more of the areas and get a unique experience. Some might get around the park by biking or driving Trail Ridge Road. And some like to come become junior rangers to be good stewards and to learn how to help rangers protect the park. And some are able to come and learn more about the park and attend one of our many ranger-led programs. And of course, some people come to view the spectacular wildlife that we have here in the park, like our mule deer, our elk, and our moose. So these are some of the three most common animals that we see throughout the park. We also have bighorn sheep, marmots, and pika that live in the alpine tundra. And I'll mention pika are unique animals. Many people sound like Mark didn't know what I was talking about when I said my favorite animal was the pika. So a pika is about the size of a baked potato with round ears, kind of like Mickey Mouse. It's one of my favorite animals, and it's one of the toughest animals living in the alpine tundra because unlike marmots that hibernate in the wintertime, pika stay active all year round. What they do in the summertime is they gather lots of sticks or lots of grasses and flowers in the alpine tundra and build little haystacks in their den. And then throughout the wintertime, they'll just munch on that haystack and hang out in their den. So they don't actually sleep or hibernate like our marmots do. Some of the more rarer animals that we have here in the park are black bears, mountain lions, and bobcats. I have so far in my time here at Rocky, I've seen two of the three. So they're very rarely seen, but it's an amazing opportunity if you get a chance to. And that's because there's only about 20 to 30 black bear here in the park, and about 30, they have an estimate of about 30 mountain lions in or near the park as well. So some might come to Rocky Mountain just to immerse themselves in nature. So as you can see, there are many things for visitors to do in Rocky, and there are many reasons that they might feel connected or drawn to coming to Rocky Mountain National Park. So Rocky Mountain National Park is a very special place, and as you can see, quite beautiful. I hope you all get a chance to come visit Rocky Mountain and see it for yourself because pictures just don't do this place justice. Now, before we lead to some questions, I just wanted to share a really cool story of something that happened to me just last year. So I've been a seasonal National Park Service ranger since 2019. I've worked at both Glacier National Park in Montana and most recently, of course, here at Rocky Mountain National Park here in Colorado. So ever since I was young, I traveled to several national parks with my family. At each of these parks, I would do the junior ranger programs, and earn my junior ranger badge. But these trips really inspired me to become a park ranger. So this photo here was from about 20 years ago at the Fall River Visitor Center with my two cousins. So this is me here in pink. So earlier this year, or towards the end of last year, I was working in one of our visitor centers here in the park, and this gentleman comes up and starts sharing some stories about how he was a park ranger here for 20 years. And I thought, wow, I should show him this photo and see if he might recognize who this ranger was in this photo, since I asked around and couldn't find out the name of this ranger here. Well, sure enough, so I pulled out my phone, showed him this photo. He looks at it and goes, "That's me." So by complete chance, I ended up meeting the Rocky Ranger that swore me in as a junior ranger 20 years ago. So it was a pretty incredible moment to experience here in my Park Service career, and it was very bittersweet to meet him. All right, so thank you all for listening to my presentation about Rocky Mountain National Park. Mark, I'll hand it back to you for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Darcy, and thank you for sharing that amazing story with us. Darcy and I had checked in prior to the presentation tonight, and Darcy had shared that story with me, and she was like, "Should I tell that?" I'm like, "Absolutely. That's an amazing story." And I think it drives home, the importance of stewardship and creating the next generation of stewards with programs like our Junior Ranger program and ed programs and stuff like that. I do want to encourage folks to put any questions that they have in the chat. We already have some coming in here. So to get us started, um, one person was asking all that snow, right? That's an amazing amount of snow, 15 to 30 feet, I think you said at one point. I get upset when we get a few inches of snow here and I have to shovel it, so I cannot imagine that much snow for that duration. Someone was asking though about do avalanches occur in the park? And I guess kind of more broadly, besides that, you showed us those awesome videos of the snow removal.
Mhm.
Um, but maybe kind of a follow up to that is what are um, if someone visited the park in the winter, right, what would they expect to see? Are they going to see an avalanche? Are they going to have to deal with all this snow? Like, what would they expect if they visited this time of year?
Yeah, so here at Rocky, yes, we get a lot of snow, but because our park here changes drastically in elevation, we can often, as you can even see in this photo, it could be bare ground, no snow down here, but then lots of snow in the mountains. So um, coming in the wintertime is honestly amazing. It's a whole new world here in Rocky if you come in the winter. There's so many different opportunities for snowshoeing, skiing, cross country skiing, ice fishing, even. And so it's a really amazing time to visit. But it definitely requires a lot more preparedness to visit here in the winter time. So, like I said, down kind of in the valleys in town near the visitor centers, we don't usually see a ton of snow, and not as much as the alpine tundra. We might have a couple feet of snow on the ground throughout the winter, but it's so windy here, it often gets blown around as well. But if you plan to hike into the mountains, like I showed you that picture of Mills Lake or Dream Lake, that is definitely an area where you would want to be prepared wearing traction devices for your boots. So, like crampons or spikes for the bottoms of your shoes. And then also, or even snowshoes, depending on the amount of snow. And then avalanches. Yes, we definitely have avalanches here. So we try to share that information. We always check. Colorado is really great at sharing avalanche information, what type of danger it is, what kind of I guess snowpack that we were looking at, and how dangerous it is to go into the backcountry where there is a lot of snow. So we do share that information with visitors. We encourage them to also check, of course, the Colorado Avalanche Information Center to learn more, and to check that to make sure that they're prepared for what to expect with the snowpack in the backcountry. So it can range anywhere from low danger, kind of like fire danger, low danger, all the way up to extreme. So it's just winter does require a lot more preparation than in the summer.
Mhm. So with things like you had mentioned earlier in your presentation that there was a ski resort there at one point.
Yes.
You mentioned cross-country skiing and skiing. Now, in more modern times, like if you were to visit now, are there actual cross-country skiing trails that people can go on, or is it more kind of just a backcountry wilderness experience if you were to do something like that?
So you don't necessarily have to go into the backcountry to go like cross country skiing, especially. You're allowed to like cross country ski into the meadows if there's enough snow. So in the winter, there's a little more flexibility about going off trail, as long as you know where you're going, of course. So, but you don't really have to go too far into the backcountry to really get out and experience the park. The park is still pretty accessible in the winter time. So although Trail Ridge Road and Old Fall River Road are closed, there's also Bear Lake Road that you can drive, and it leads you right up to an alpine lake. So you really don't have to hike very far. So we have a lot of snowshoers and backcountry skiers that go out into the backcountry from that area. But like I said, you can go not very far to see that first alpine lake.
All right.
Most of our trails, though, we do have winter trails in the winter time, so people can like definitely see where to go, and then so they can stay on those populated marked trails, so that it's not like they're fending for themselves in the backcountry. We definitely don't have, so our ski resort was the Hidden Valley Ski Resort, and that was actually removed in the early 90s. So really not that long ago. So we still see
Mhm.
remnants of the ski runs and where the lifts were, but those have all since been removed. But Hidden Valley is actually now a sledding area. So families will bring their kids to go sledding in that area, and it's relatively safe because it's actually so steep in that area, you don't see many avalanches there.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I may have to visit in winter now and go sledding. That sounds awesome. Let's get, there were a few more questions about snow and winter, and I'm ready to put winter behind us. So let's get the snow and winter questions out of the way. This year here, when I took that photograph I showed earlier, our first snowfall was in December. So somebody asked, when do you usually start to see snow? And I'm imagining it probably depends on what elevation you're at. But when do you first see snow? And then somebody else was remarking on the very large wooden beams on the roof of the Alpine Visitor Center, and if that had something to do with architecturally to help support the building during the winter months.
Absolutely. So we can see snow, especially up in the mountains, anytime from September on. So September and October, we might start getting some snow up in the Alpine, but oftentimes that it'll snow like a dusting and then melt. So it's truly, on average, we've been seeing Trail Ridge Road having to be closed because the amount of snow that it snows up in the Alpine anywhere from end of September to the end of October. It really fluctuates depending on the weather. But it can even start snowing down in the lower elevations, down where the visitor centers are. Anytime from late September on to early October. I think my first season here, we had a snowstorm the day before Halloween. So it was quite interesting to go trick or treating. They have a big thing downtown, and there was just mounds of snow everywhere. So yeah, we can get snow anytime even in the fall. So but it's very beautiful that time of year as well. And yes, so these beams here at the Alpine Visitor Center, they're meant to help structurally support that building. Although it's mostly made out of rocks, this is supposed to help keep the roof from caving in. So, because they get mounds of snow. I wish I had a picture of it, but essentially the Alpine Visitor Center gets buried in the wintertime. You can't actually really see it except for maybe the parts of the roof sticking out of the snow.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing. And the person was asking about, is it kind of just an architectural piece? It does look really cool architecturally too, but nice to
Yes.
know that it also serves a purpose. Okay, that's enough about winter and snow. There were a lot of questions about animals. So one of the questions about animals was, you mentioned how many mountain lions and how many black bears roughly there were in the park. Do you have any idea of how many bobcats there are in the park?
Ooh, that's a great question. They're a harder kind of like our bears and mountain lions. Those are really rough estimates from research done, especially for a black bears, research done in the early 2000s. So it's still a little out of date. Same with our mountain lions. There hasn't been like a hard study done, but that's about the estimate that the park, as well as the local Colorado Parks and Wildlife, kind of estimate for this area. Bobcats are also one of those kind of elusive creatures that it's really hard to get an estimate of those species. So we're not sure how many bobcats exactly are in the park, but it might be a future study someday.
Awesome. Um, there was another question about are there no bison or grizzly bears in Rocky Mountain? And also a follow-up from someone else asking about wolves and whether or not wolves pass through the park.
Those are all really great questions and very common questions that we get because there are bison further down the mountains in the plains. Unfortunately, though, at least now we do not have any bison here in Rocky Mountain. There's evidence that there may have been bison up here back in the day, but unfortunately, I think for this area, they were hunted to extinction. As well, the same goes for our wolves and our grizzly bears, unfortunately. So there is evidence that we once had grizzlies and wolves here, But in those late 1800s, early 1900s, unfortunately, when the hunters and trappers came in through here, those pelts were very valuable. And unfortunately, those species were hunted to extinction. Um, what's interesting, though, is that not the national park, but the state of Colorado has recently, just in the last couple years, released wolves back into the state of Colorado. And they've
Hmm.
been tracking their movements throughout the state. And the wolves have gotten pretty close to the park, but there has not been any confirmed sightings of them in the park. Their radio collars kind of ping their locations based on watersheds. So we did see that a wolf location pinged within the same watershed as the west side of the park, but it's a very big watershed. So it really, and it was in a, it's shared with the Never Summer Mountains Wilderness area. So it really could have been anywhere there. So
Hmm.
still no confirmed sightings of wolves, potentially in the future though. So we'll see what that does to the ecosystem here for sure.
Awesome. Um, Someone was asking about more pesky, perhaps, inhabitants of Rocky Mountain National Park. So, someone was mentioning that, moose in New Hampshire, in particular, have cause a problem with ticks.
Oh.
Is that something that is true in Rocky Mountain? Do you see a lot of ticks? Do they tend to be, is there a connection between maybe moose and deer, perhaps, and how many ticks you may see? Are they even there?
Yes, we do have ticks here. The more common issue that we have with ticks is like in spring and early summer before it really gets dry. So kind of that wetter time of year where it's warm for them. We don't see too many issues with ticks kind of impacting moose or deer. What you have to be really careful for with ticks here is we don't necessarily have Lyme's disease, which I know can be common kind of further east. Here you have to worry about Rocky Mountain fever with our ticks. And but with our moose and our deer populations, we don't really see a huge impact with ticks on our moose and elk. And what's interesting too is so moose are technically there's kind of a up in the air about whether they're actually native to Colorado. So moose were introduced to Colorado in the 1970s for a hunting game species. So we are still from the 1970s on, we've been seeing a big change in our ecosystem because of the moose that have kind of moved into this area. So our moose populations continue to increase because there are no native predators here that can really manage that population besides our mountain lions.
Hmm. So perhaps from less advantageous creatures that inhabit the park to maybe one of the cutest, the pika. Never heard of it, never seen it before. One of our participants was asking about the pika in particular. They want to know how many are there in the park on average. And you said pika are about the size of a baked potato. But what size of baked potato? Are we talking a big baked potato, a little baked potato? Um,
Yeah, so pika again is one of those species. They are continuously actually monitoring pika right now because they are such a can't remember the word, not keystone species, but indicator species due to climate change because they are so impacted by warming temperatures. So pika can really only live in areas that are usually 70 degrees or less. Fahrenheit because they need to live in these cool temperatures, typically at higher elevations. As we're starting to see just general temperatures heating over time and our alpine ecosystem getting warmer, we are seeing an impact on our pika survival rates because they essentially overheat and have heat stroke if they get too hot. So we have an ongoing across all of the national parks. Actually, we have a pika project where we do surveys. So anyone can actually participate as long as they go through citizen science training for how to monitor and count pika. But all across the Park Service, including here at Rocky Mountain, we've been doing pika surveys to figure out really how many pika we have and how their population trends are going. Um, the size of a pika, I'd say it'd be maybe a small to medium baked potato, about this big. They almost look like a very small rabbit with no tail. So
Hearing about a pica overheating is maybe one of the saddest things I've heard, but hearing you describe the pica, that made it better. So, um, one last question about wildlife before we move on to some of the more tourism related questions. Um, one of the participants was asking a little bit beyond just the population size. What are some factors that affect the rarity of certain species in the park? So specifically, you mentioned it's very tough to see a mountain lion, right? Obviously, there's not a lot of them. Are there other factors that contribute to them being seen less than, let's say, a mule deer or another species?
absolutely. So it kind of has to do with just the overall ecosystem that we see here in Rocky Mountain National Park, as well as Rocky is surrounded by a mix of national forest and wilderness areas, as well as some local like mountain towns too. So it's kind of looking at this area and the general area of what kind of habitats are here. So for example, for mountain lions, there's not very many of them. In this area, probably due to there's a lot of human activity in this area, and they usually try to avoid humans. But also because, like I mentioned earlier, 1/3 of the park is alpine ecosystem, which is very a niche ecosystem that not a ton of animal species can survive. So that means 2/3 of the park is either subalpine or montane. And so our mountain lions here they typically stay in that subalpine to montane areas hunting for mule deer. Um, with our mule deer populations, as well as moose and elk, really their populations are quite big here um, because there's not many native predators anymore. There's really just mountain lions and coyotes sometimes. They usually will scavenge after a mountain lion kill, but we don't have a ton of predators here. So our ungulates, our prey species like moose, deer, and elk, we see a lot of them here. And actually, elk, we have been seeing since there was not many predators here, really managing the population species of elk. We saw their populations skyrocket. And the park actually put together an elk management project to help manage the population species to kind of help out with the ecosystem because we were seeing overgrazing of our willow trees and our wetland areas in the park that actually kind of drove out a lot of our beavers from the park. So they started trying to fence off areas in the park to protect our willow species to allow them to grow larger because when they're saplings and small, the elk will graze on them and then those willows die and the beavers need the more mature willow trees. So it's kind of this chain reaction with our elk. So we have these fenced off areas all throughout the park. So if you come to visit, don't be alarmed. There's no animals usually fenced off in those areas. We actually try to keep the animals out of those areas. That's why we have those fenced off areas to protect the willow trees. But yeah, so just kind of our populations really fluctuate and change depending on the food availability and the type of habitats that's available to them. Another great example is our black bears here are actually relatively smaller than black bears across the country because their main food source are ants. So they mostly eat insects, berries, and nuts. So because their food source is kind of so small, they have to eat so many. Just genetically, our black bears are kind of small here, but they can still do some damage. They have unfortunately learned how to open car doors. So
Oh, wow.
yes.
Smart bears, like Yogi Bear. I won't make the joke about Yogi Bear. Anyways, um, there are some tourism related questions that I think we can kind of tackle at once. One person was asking about what is the most appealing aspect of visiting during the different seasons of the year, and someone else was asking about foliage. and whether or not what's the fall foliage colors like, what is the season of transition like. So maybe just a little bit about, some of the highlights in each season.
Sure. So, fall is my favorite time of the year. So I'll start with fall. The fall foliage here, I will say it's probably not as colorful as over on the East Coast with all the different colors, the reds, oranges, yellows. But here at Rocky, we do get some fall colors, which is pretty amazing. It's mostly bright gold yellow, and that's our quaking aspen trees. So our aspen trees transition into yellow, I'd say around September, anywhere from kind of beginning, middle of September on. That's when we start seeing our aspen trees changing and the air getting cooler. But also in the fall, not only do people come to see the fall colors, but also come to see the elk rut, like I mentioned. It's an amazing experience to be able to see the elk rut. You can just see like dozens to hundreds of elk in the meadows here, chasing each other, the bulls trying to keep their ladies together, and fighting or locking antlers with another bull, trying to show off to those ladies. So it's a really cool experience to see that. Winter time. So winter is a very unique part of the year to see Rocky Mountain. Like I said before, some of the roads aren't accessible up into the high country, like up to the Alpine Visitor Center, but there's still lots of things to do, and you can still access quite a bit of the park especially for a mountainous park. Like I said, Bear Lake Road is a very popular attraction during really any time of the year, but especially in the winter time, it's the most accessible. And a lot of people will go snowshoeing, cross country skiing, backcountry skiing, where people will skin out to the top or up into the alpine and then ski down. So it's a very unique time of the year to come visit. Spring definitely is more of our muddy season. It's kind of our spring can be interesting. You kind of never know what kind of weather you're going to get. We often will get spring snowstorms. So even in March and April, February, March, and April are actually some of our wettest times of year. So definitely be prepared for rain and or snow. I know last year we had an April snowstorm that got about 1.5 to 2 feet of snow. So you just really never know. So it's definitely good to be prepared weather-wise coming to visit Rocky in the springtime. But in late spring, early summer, it's beautiful with our wildflowers here. Our wildflowers kind of start blooming in, I'd say, May, June, down in the lower elevations. And then as the snow continues to melt further up in the alpine, July, August is when you really start to see the beautiful wildflowers up in the alpine tundra. And those are very unique too. So it's kind of nice that throughout the spring and summer, you really get to see a lot of different wildflowers. And then summer is our most popular time of the year to come visit because it's the time where Rocky is the most accessible. So we have a lot of people that will come hiking, camping, backpacking in the backcountry, and that's when all of our recreation opportunities are really available.
Awesome. I'm sure one of the things that people love to see in the park is waterfalls, and someone was asking how accessible some of those waterfalls are.
Yeah, so some of our waterfalls are a quick, easy jaunt to the base of a waterfall. There's the alluvial fan, which is one of my favorite waterfalls. That's just less than it's like a quarter mile to less than a half a mile to get to where it's flowing, and it's a cascade of different waterfalls. It's really beautiful. Some of our other waterfalls might be more of a hike into the park. So they might be around 2 to 5 to 10 miles round trip. So we have over 200 miles of trails here in the park. So you can really get around to seeing lots of different views. But the Wild Basin area is one of the best areas to see waterfalls. There's a really beautiful hike there where there's just a quarter mile in is the first set of waterfalls. Another couple miles in is the second set, and another couple miles in is a third set. So it's a nice little train of waterfalls.
Awesome. Other another person was asking a little bit about accommodations and whether or not there's accommodations in the park besides camping, or if they're located outside of the park, or how does that work?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, so kind of that Mission 66 era, a lot of our lodges did get removed from the park. They really wanted to return Rocky back into its natural state, and kind of focus more on the wilderness aspect. But fortunately, here at Rocky, we are actually very close to two mountain towns just on the outside of either side of our park. So there's Grand Lake on the west side that has it's a cute little mountain town, lots of accommodations there, from hotels to more camping, to some different resorts. I know there's the Grand Lake Lodge, which is a historical lodge, just located just outside of the park on the west side. Then here on the east side at an Estes Park, it's another town that has lots of accommodations. They even have plenty of restaurants outside of the park, and it's just a couple miles down the road from the national park, which is really nice. And Estes Park has another historical hotel as well called the Stanley Hotel, which might sound familiar if you are a fan of The Shining. So it's actually where the author stayed and wrote it. It got inspired by this hotel to write about The Shining.
I probably would pass on staying there, but nice to know that that's that
I
that's
know.
there and that there are options if you don't want to like hike out into the back country and camp in the back country.
Yeah, and what
There were so many amazing questions. I think we got to most of them. I know we missed a few, and I apologize if we missed your questions. But it's almost time for us to wrap it up. So my obligatory last question in these Parked at Home series is, are there any helpful tips or tricks if I wanted to visit Rocky Mountain National Park this summer? What kind of helpful tips or tricks could you insider, because everybody here now has spent all this time with you. What are the insider tips and tricks that you can share with us?
Yeah, so at Rocky Mountain, I would definitely recommend you have to plan ahead. So here at Rocky, we are one of the typically the one of the many national parks that has timed entry reservations, especially in the summer, going into early fall. Each year, it's been a pilot program, but now it's been permanently established here in the park. But on our website at nps.gov/ROMO, definitely check out our website for all the updates and the latest about timed entry, because you really want to make sure that you get online to get those timed entry reservations and to try to help plan your trip, so that you're able to visit Rocky Mountain National Park. I also would recommend, paying attention and being prepared for all kinds of weather here in Rocky. Since we are in the mountains, I like to say, they make their own weather. So afternoon thunderstorms are a frequent occurrence here in the summertime. So it's always good to be prepared. If you're doing any hiking, you definitely want to get up early and do it in the morning.
Awesome. Well, Darcy, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Um, that was an amazing presentation. I learned a lot. I learned about maybe one of the cutest animals I think I've ever seen in my life. So thank you so much for joining us. It was great having you here. And it was great having everyone here. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We hope to see you next Thursday. It'll be a pretty big change up from a park in the alpine region, 12,000 feet up, to a battlefield. Next week, we'll change our turn to the 250th anniversary of our country, and we will be joined by a park ranger from Saratoga National Historical Park to talk about the Battle of Saratoga. So that should be a fascinating conversation, and we hope that you all can join us then. But thank you, everybody. Hope you have a great night, and we will see you next Thursday. Take care, everybody.
Hi, everyone.